Thank you all for coming. Thank you for avoiding the sunshine out there, come inside a dark room. Yeah, so we feel this is a really important conversation that has not been had so far. My name is James Hutt, and I am the provincial coordinator for the Nova Scotia Citizens Healthcare Network. And we put on this town hall meeting tonight to talk a little bit about home care, where we're at right now in Nova Scotia, and what the government's proposing, and how that might impact patients, family members, and health professionals. So we've organized it to hear from a variety of perspectives. We have a panel discussion to show that plurality of voices, but also to hear from you in the audience, because I know there's not a lot of wealth of knowledge and insight in the room. So some quick logistical announcements up front. The washrooms are right over there, both male and female. If you go out and to the right, coffee, tea, water, cookies, all at the back, everything you need to keep your sugar level up. We are going to have the 4 panelists speak. Each panelist will have up to 10 minutes to speak and to share their remarks. We'll hold questions until the end. And you'll notice I said 4 panelists, so I'm wearing a bit of 2 different hats right now. I'm moderating, and I'm also going to say a little bit about the research, because in my role with the Health Network, I've also done a fair amount of research on competitive bidding and what competitive bidding actually means for home care. Okay. Where is Dee Dee? Is that okay? Great. Okay, so I think just to get us started for tonight, Debbie, do you mind speaking first?
I guess not.
I know we're talking in a second, but
No, I don't mind.
And I also need to drink water, so.
No problem.
And as Debbie's taking the stand, I'll just say that Debbie is a district and community nurse with the Victoria Order of Nurses for 17 years, and also a wound resource nurse. So thank you.
I'll try not to speak for 10 minutes, although I sometimes tend to go on and on. I'll be as brief as I can. I've been with VON for 17 years, and it was sort of my ideal job as a girl growing up down the valley. The oldest of 5 children. I remember the health nurse coming to the house, and I thought someday I want to be that kind of a nurse. And I trained at the old Halifax Infirmary, so I've been a nurse for a long time. So when I got the position as a VON nurse, I was quite honored and privileged to have that position. And then working in the community, patients, and we call them clients, not patients, make you feel so valued, and they're so appreciative to be able to be in their home and not to have to be in hospital or go back and forth to a clinic and that sort of thing. And you become almost a part of their family with the appreciation of family members not having to take time off work to take someone somewhere for an injection or have to go to the hospital for an intravenous, or when it comes to palliative clients, the ability for them to be able to stay in their own home and sleep in their own bed, have their pets there with them, their family able to come and see them, and then family members not having to go pay for parking and take the extra time off of work. It's much more relaxing for them at home, and most people are comfortable. It's not everybody wants to be at home, but for those that are, I feel very privileged to be able to help them in that way. I'm one of many community nurses, and with the VON, I do feel that we're very supported, that we are very supported in our education, because as nurses we are obligated to keep up on all the best practice guidelines and keep up on all of our skills and on the education. And as one thing, as a home care nurse, I do feel that we are encouraged to do that, and we have the ability to be able to do that with support. The changes that are coming, and I'm certainly not an expert in that field whatsoever, but as a wound resource nurse, I'm in contact with nurses all across the country and actually in other parts of the world as well. And hearing stories of how other people are dealing with that, I am concerned for not only the patients, but me as a nurse, and am I going to be able to feel that I'm doing the quality of nursing that I want to do. I think everybody has a job when you go home at the end of the day. There are days that are pretty crappy and you're tired and that sort of thing. And then there are days that you go home and you feel great and you feel super. But it's a good kind of tired. That's what I say to my children who are now grown and have their own jobs, is as tired as I am, it's a really good kind of tired, because I know that when I left someone's home, that if I could count the thank yous, I would be, I've had a nickel for every one of you, rich lady. And so I really appreciate that, and I hope that nurses, coming up, I'm one of the nurses that are nearing retirement, and I hope those that are coming up and are new nurses don't have struggles, that they have the support that they need so that they can truly feel good at the end of their day and that they've helped someone. I don't want to get into too many particulars, but I do know there are some of the clients who have asked me, what about this and what about that and what should I do, and I just say as a nurse, I'm going to continue to do the job that I can in hopes that everything will work out to benefit not just patients but to the nurses and other healthcare workers that are working in the community. And that's so thank you.
Thank you, Debbie, and thank you for your flexibility. I figured we wouldn't start with all my facts and figures, so as not to put everyone to sleep right away. So, the Nova Scotia Health Network, the organization that I represent, has decided to put on tonight to really get people talking about home care. And I'm switching hats here, and I'm going to start speaking as a researcher and the coordinator for the Health Network. So, we have put on this town hall meeting because, as I mentioned, huge changes are coming, and it should come as no surprise that Nova Scotia has particular challenges and urgencies facing our continuing care system in Nova Scotia. Now, tonight I'm going to talk about 3 different things. I want to talk about, very briefly, who the Health Network is, what we do, and then I'm going to put tonight into context. We'll talk a bit more about continuing care in the province, and especially home care. And then, third, I'll go into competitive bidding and talk about what that is and what the research shows from looking at elsewhere across the country. Now, first, the Nova Scotia Citizens Healthcare Network is a non-profit organization. We fight for better public health care. Quite simply, we believe that healthcare should be based on need, not your ability to pay. We are a coalition of family members, of patients, of healthcare professionals, caregivers, and community organizations from all across the province. We work to protect public health care, to strengthen it, and to expand it. So we work to protect it from cuts and from privatization, to strengthen it, to make sure that there is adequate funding, and for solutions like collaborative care. And then we work to expand it, to actually expand on what's covered under public health care. One of our most recent victories we've had is getting the past government to expand dental coverage for children from age 7 and up to age 17. Now, it was supposed to go up to age 15 this past year. It's going to go up incrementally, but the current government has not honored that promise. We're hoping they still will, because that is 11,000 children who would have received dental coverage this year. Originally, we were founded in 1996 to combat creeping levels of privatization and to create a forum where people can come together from all walks of life, from all political stripes, to talk about what's going on in their healthcare system and to share their knowledge and expertise. And that's exactly what we're doing here tonight. Welcome. So we organized this town hall meeting to hear from all of you. This is the 5th meeting we've held around the province. We've been in Bridgewater, New Glasgow, Sydney, and Amherst, and now Halifax. Making that half circle, we're going to go further south. So the people on this panel, as well as many of you in the room, have vast experience and insight into the healthcare system. So I invite you all to share it and as we get to the question period and comments, to share the valuable insights you hold and what needs to be improved in the healthcare system. Because we think in the healthcare network that at times people who depend on, live in, and work in the healthcare system share those insights and governments start listening to them. Now, I'd like to put tonight into context. Continuing care in Nova Scotia is in crisis. It should come as no surprise that we are an aging population and a have-not province. Already, our province is struggling to deal with that. Within 10 years, a quarter of our population will be over 65. There are currently over 2,500 people waiting to get a bed in a long-term care home. And the average wait for a long-term care home is over 2 years, but that can extend a lot, as happened to my grandmother, who waited upwards of 3. Often, people with chronic illness are stuck in hospital beds because there's simply nowhere to transfer them to. This creates a drain on our hospitals and their ability to treat acute care and illness and injuries. This is exactly what happened earlier this year at the QE2 hospital in Halifax, which for weeks was backed up. The emergency room was so backlogged with patients that often patients in the emergency room in the middle were waiting over 24 hours before they could get to a hospital bed. And these demands and these shortages are only going to increase as our population ages and we struggle with some of the highest rates of chronic illness in the country. So clearly something needs to be done to make sure that we're treating our seniors and the chronically ill adequately and timely. So the provincial Liberal government has decided to increase funding and supports for home care as a means to alleviate the burden on long-term care. The government has refused to open any new long-term care beds, and instead they've invested $32 million in the past budget in home care, and then $3.8 million in this current budget in home care. Their plan is to focus on keeping people in their homes longer to reduce the strain on nursing facilities. However, we've heard concerns about this either-or approach. Specifically, we've heard from caregivers and providers that focusing exclusively on home care risks forcing people to stay in their homes longer than they're able to, and to adding burdens to unpaid caregivers, most of whom are women. That being said, the investments are desperately needed in home care. And the government's focusing on home care right now with these reforms. So the Health Network has decided to have this conversation around home care as a larger and later launching pad to talk about continuing care. And I should say that those investments in home care are much needed, but they need to be put into the context of the 2,500 people, waiting for long-term care, and the over 800 on the wait list for home care. Now, home care provides support to over 24,000 Nova Scotians, or over 12,000 on a daily basis. And that's a 13% increase over the past 2 years. The majority of these patients are seniors, and there are still a significant number of children and young adults. And despite the recent budget increases, the wait list continues to grow. So home care consists of two types of care: home nursing and home support. We've heard from Debbie to talk about home nursing. Laurel in a second is going to talk about home support. One thing complicating the current situation in Nova Scotia around home care, as in all healthcare professions, is a shortage of healthcare workers in the province. And this applies generally to all professions. It's estimated that within 5 years, we'll have a gap of 800 nurses. And there are similar shortages for other professions, such as continuing care assistants. That's a very general overview of continuing care and home care in the province. So there's a number of things the government's doing well, some welcome investments, but there are a number of areas where we need real improvement. So now I want to talk about what the government's planning, that is competitive bidding, what that actually means, and what it could look like for Nova Scotia. Last fall, the Liberal government announced plans to open home care to competitive bidding. They've hired a consultant to look at the process of tendering and awarding contracts and how that bidding could be structured. However, we know this is already a foregone conclusion, not so much about how it will be done or if, but when. Competitive bidding means that home care providers would bid on a certain contract and then would win based on price, cost, often the level, the financial amount of their bid, as well as certain other factors. Now, opening the home care services, opening those contracts to bidding, means that these services will be open to for-profit companies and corporations who can come in and bid on the contracts. Today in Nova Scotia, home support is provided by 20 non-profit organizations around the province and 5 for-profit companies. All of the home support services around the province, except for Halifax, are not-for-profit. There are only 5 for-profit companies, and that's in the Capital District Health Authority, or Halifax, HRM, and those were introduced as a short-term solution. One of the impetuses for this move from the Liberal government to look at home care, to look at restructuring, is because healthcare is a joint responsibility between the federal government and the provincial government. And it's important to remember that in the light of recent cuts from the federal government, the provincial government is going to be looking at different ways to structure healthcare. Now, the biggest cause for competitive bidding, despite what you might have heard about rising costs, is not an aging population or declining tax base, but federal cuts to funding. So March 31st marked the anniversary of the expiration of the 2004 Health Accord, which is an agreement between the federal government and the provinces about how health gets funded. The Harper government, when the 2004 Accord expired in 2014, refused to sign a new accord, and instead they unilaterally cut $36 billion from healthcare over the next decade. So for Nova Scotia, what that looks like is a $902 million cut. $902 million gone from the healthcare system over the next decade, or, to put that in context, the equivalent of 10% of all the nurses in the healthcare system in Nova Scotia gone. So that's going to be a huge impact. The Health Network is working with our provincial partners, as well as the Canadian Health Coalition, to call for strong, stable, and adequate funding for healthcare, as well as national standards. But this is, in a nutshell, one of the reasons the government is looking to restructure home care. So, if the move is to cut down on costs, then we need to be asking, what will competitive bidding do? Will it actually reduce costs? And more importantly, will it improve care for patients, or will it reduce health outcomes? Based on what we've seen in the literature so far, the Health Network is very concerned. It seems more as if a desire to cut the deficit at all costs and looking at patients and our seniors as a liability rather than an investment. So we're looking at the evidence, and I'll get into what happened in Ontario, which is the biggest case study in a second. But we also want to bring the public voice into this, because this is a discussion that wasn't happening. So for home care bidding across the province, this separate new procurement system in which you put out a tender and bid on it in home care has a very limited experience in Canadian healthcare. To date, only 2 provinces have actually tried it. That is Alberta and Ontario. Alberta's experience has been very, very limited, and it's been only in the last couple of years, and a lot of that has been pushed back due to community opposition. But Ontario offers the bigger case study. Ontario introduced competitive bidding in home care in 1996, so they've had about 20 years of experience to look at it. And what we see looking at Ontario, and Ontario's example with competitive bidding, is that it did 3 main things. 1 is that it changed the nature of the sector. 2, it changed the nature of the work and who was doing that. And then 3, it changed the price tag. So in 1996, when Ontario introduced competitive bidding, the nature of the sector changed. When they opened a competitive bidding, a lot of for-profit companies and corporations came in, many underbid, and as a result, small community-based organizations, agencies, and charity providers like the Victoria Order of Nurses got pushed out. And it's important to note here that the Victoria Order of Nurses had been in some Ontario communities since 1897. So you think about the relationships, the knowledge that gets built up over time in a community, and how that would be lost. Right now, Ontario has 58% of home nursing and 64% of home support in private for-profit hands, making it the largest privatized home care system in the country. But the important thing here to consider is not necessarily who provides the service, but what happened to the healthcare system, what happened to the information that providers share, and then the patients. So the other aspect of changing the nature of the sector is that these for-profit companies do not talk to each other. Now, by necessity, these companies are in competition with each other. They are competing to bid on home care contracts, and so often they don't share information about patients, anything from medical needs to routines, but even to a bigger scale, there's no sharing of best practices, because that's something that could give these companies a leg up to their competitors on the next contract, to have them bid and lose. So there's no sharing of information in that respect. So it changes the nature of the sector from one where we need to be moving towards innovation and integration, more collaborative care. It stops that process and instead shifts to one of fragmentation and competition. But then it also changed the nature of the work. Now, when these companies came in, the first thing, or one of the first things they did was lower the amount of time that patients received. We saw this quite clearly in Alberta. Often, home care nurses and home support workers were given more patients to see in the same amount of time. Often, their travel time was reduced, meaning that they had less time to get between patients. That was unrealistic, forcing the home support workers or the home nurse to figure out if they were A, going to leave the patient before the care was done, or work for free. The other thing they did was cut wages and benefits. Now, many of these companies hired non-unionized workers. And this is important to consider, because who goes into working in home care and home nursing? 98% of home nursing and home support is women. It's a female-driven sector. So what happens when you slash wages and working conditions and benefits to a female-driven sector? It is a reduction on gender equality. And then the result on that for patients was that, not surprisingly, home support workers and home nurses left to better paid sectors, such as acute care and long-term care. Because if you're making just above minimum wage in home care, but can make $18, $20 an hour, which still isn't very much in hospital or long-term care sector, why wouldn't you leave and do that? And that's exactly what happened. So we saw in Ontario that before competitive bidding, they had a turnover rate of home support workers of 15%. That is, on a yearly basis, 15% of home support workers left the sector. Afterwards, it became 57%. So more than 1 in 2 home support workers left the sector after competitive bidding. And one of the most important aspects of continuing care, of home care, is people entering your homes, having to know your caregiver and having a regularity of care with providers, having someone who knows your medication, your routine, and your personal needs. I think I've gone on past 10 minutes, but I just wanted to wrap up by saying that the third thing it did was change the price tag. And this is both for the healthcare system and patients individually. Now, with all these different companies, they had to have different administrations, different advertising and marketing, and the overhead became much higher because there's a great deal of duplicity and redundancy in terms of the way these companies are propped up, especially with the lack of sharing of information. And the Ontario Auditor General looked at the competitive bidding of home care in Ontario and found that the overhead administration was 30% for home care companies. Now, this is one of the factors that resulted in home care becoming much more expensive to the government, so much so that they actually put a cap on the number of people receiving it. The other way that home care became more expensive is that these companies, in order to make a profit, started upselling to patients, started upselling unnecessary services that seniors and the chronically ill had to buy out of pocket. And this became such a problem that the Ontario Auditor General actually recommended consumer protection for the seniors in Ontario against these for-profit companies pushing unnecessary services. Now, it's important to note that after 20 years of competitive bidding in Ontario, the practice has been suspended, not once, but twice. The impacts have been so bad in terms of creating a shortage of healthcare workers, turnover, and the amount of care that patients receive and the cost, that the Ontario Auditor General looked at the home care bidding and found the procurement process to be inadequate, inefficient, and unevenly monitored and managed. Now, I met with our health minister, Leo Levine, a couple weeks ago to talk about this. And I looked at the example of Ontario and Alberta. I brought it up and I asked him, Mr. Levine, what lessons do you draw from these experiences? And he said, none. I'm not sure why. And then to follow up, I asked, well, what public consultations are you holding? How can the public provide a voice? How are you hearing from patients or caregivers? And he seemed shocked, and he said that if people wanted consultation, they could call and leave a message at his constituency office. And I think this is not only backwards politically, but I think it's a real wasted opportunity for our healthcare system. I think we have a real wealth of knowledge from those who live in and work and depend on the healthcare system, and in this room right here. So I encourage us all to share about that and start talking. This is the 5th Town Hall, and at every one, I've invited people from continuing care and the government's health and wellness department to sit on the panel. That has not happened. So we think it's important to bring people to them and to have us start talking, sharing our perspectives as patients, as family members, and caregivers, so that the government can see how home care needs to be improved. Thank you. I'll switch hats again. So, up next we have Laurel Taylor, who's been a home support worker and a CCA, and she graduated from the Continuing Care Assistant Program. I'll stop using acronyms. In 2013. So please give a hand for Laurel.
Hi. When I was asked to join the panel this evening, my understanding would be that I would be a resource person so that I could loan my experience and my insight as a community home support worker, but not to stand up here and give a speech, so I'm not going to do that. I became a support worker. I think I'm probably typical of a working class worker who's had to adjust to the changes and how work has changed in the last 20 years. I worked primarily as an administrative assistant and found it more difficult to get full-time hours. In that industry, there was a lot of jobs being outsourced and contracted out, a lot of precarious work. I have 2 children who are pursuing post-secondary schooling, so I needed full-time work, and this seemed to be a really good fit. I work full-time as a CCA home support worker for Northwood, so I get 40 hours a week, so that's pretty amazing to me. I have a lot of concerns about the privatization of home care delivery, and I should be able to maybe weigh in on some of that discussion later. I'm worried about the destabilization of good benefits and wages and the continuity of care that this could invoke. And I'm not happy with the lack of consultation and not happy that there doesn't seem to be a long-term home care strategy for Nova Scotia, and not a long-term care strategy nationally either. So the job has its many challenges. I would say that it's extremely rewarding. I think at this point in my life, there's so much value that I put on it in terms of the personal value that it gives me, in terms of my own personal evolution and what I take every day from the people that I meet and the people that I care for. I think I was really typical of most people in Nova Scotia. I thought of home care as primarily care for the elderly and senior. I had no idea to the extent of the care that's delivered into the home with people recovering from, acute situations, chronic illnesses, mental illnesses, and so that part, it was just amazing to me, and I think that we need to do more work in terms of public education, so that people are aware of what really happens in the home now in Nova Scotia. I think I'm typical in terms of being a mature worker in this sector. What else can I say, just on the top of my head, because I don't have a speech. I think that's all for now. But I will weigh in and loan my experience as we go forward.
Thank you, Laurel. And I just want to give an extra hand to Laurel because I called her in a frantic today. We had a bunch of last-minute changes and additions, and I called Laurel in a frantic today, and she agreed to do it very last minute, so that was fantastic. Last but not least, we have Angela Giles on the panel, and Angela is a member of the board of the Health Network, so she sits on my board. But her father, Paul Giles, also receives home care, and so she's here to share her perspective on that. Thank you, Angela.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I am very used to getting up and public speaking about a variety of issues. Because predominantly when I speak in public, it's from my Council of Canadians perspective. But tonight is a little bit different because I'm speaking about a personal situation. My father is here with us this evening as well, and maybe he'll come up and answer some questions too. But I am certain that I'm not the only family member of someone who is receiving home care in this room. So I also wasn't planning to speak for a long time. I'm really interested to hear from the room and get other people's perspectives and experiences as well. So, but just to give a little bit of background, my father has multiple sclerosis, and he's been receiving home care since the 90s, about mid-90s. He currently receives home care twice a day. So he has a home care worker who comes in the morning and stays until about noon, and then he has another home care worker, usually someone different, who comes in the evening and helps him get ready and puts him to bed. He does also sometimes get support from the VON, Victoria Order of Nurses. And I should specify it's Northwood that he also gets his home care service from. So just to give you a sense of the services that they provide for him, getting him up isn't a terribly easy task. So he has a sling and a ceiling lift that helps him to get up and get into his wheelchair. He needs to get dressed. Be dressed, by the home care worker. They also help him wash, they shave him, they help him with his personal needs, bathroom needs, they get him breakfast, which sometimes they make, sometimes it's there and they just serve it to him. They help him with eating because he's not able to do that a lot on his own anymore. They brush his teeth and his hair. They turn on his computer and help him get set up for the day. The computer is something that he uses a lot with a voice command system. And then in the evening, they come and they help him get undressed and back into bed and whatever other things he needs in between. Additionally, they do range of motion exercises with him. With multiple sclerosis, it's a degenerative disease, and he doesn't have a lot of range of motion now, so his body is very stiff, and those range of motion exercises help to kind of loosen him. And they also shower him a few times a week. So, as you can tell, it's not just someone coming in and cleaning and cooking for him. It is quite a range of services that are provided for him. And the workers that come to provide my father the service need to be specially trained. And so, for example, today he had someone come in and brought a couple of others who were going to be trained in helping to provide him with the service. So clearly we really appreciate home care in its current form. It's not perfect. He certainly wouldn't want me to pretend that it is. You know, snowstorms especially are problematic. He's very dependent on home care. And so when there's a snowstorm and a home care worker can't come, then that puts a lot of pressure on his partner, and it also makes his situation more stressful, which, as you can appreciate, doesn't help. In fact, stress really doesn't help with multiple sclerosis. It makes it worse. So, and then of course, scheduling. Sometimes he'll have difficulty getting someone scheduled for a time slot as well. And so, again, it's not perfect, but we appreciate it because it allows him to live in his own home with his family and with his cat. And it takes the pressure, as I mentioned, off of his partner, but also on the rest of us, his family, because we know that he's well taken care of. Okay, I'm going to stop looking at him now. And yes, as I mentioned, most importantly, it allows him to stay in his home. He also has strong relationships that he's developed with his home care workers. Some have been with him for many years. Fred, Klaus. And so, there is a fear from him and from us as family members that the quality of service will change, that his workers will change. They won't be receiving benefits or a living wage, and so cancellations will be more common, and an increase of stress on his situation, as I mentioned, would not be ideal. And so I really would like to thank all of you for coming. I recognize there is a member of the legislature, at least one also in the room that I've seen, so appreciating that, and so much for James as well for putting on the event tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. Now that we've heard from the panelists and heard a little bit of a different perspective of how people experience home care in the province, I wanted to open up to the audience and to hear from all of you. Something that strikes me, just my curiosity, I'm wondering how many people in this room have family members who receive home care. Can you raise your hand if you have a family member that receives home care? Can you raise your hand if you work in home care or home nursing? So just to get us started, would anyone like to share? Yeah, I'll pass this to you so we can hear if that's okay. I apologize, not.
It's impressive to see, and very grateful for that. There's an interest being shown, and I think that's very important. I want to speak very quickly to a couple of things. One is, I think it's important that we reframe the conversation about health care and about home care so that it doesn't get derailed into a different set of conversations that may not be so helpful. So one of the things, or one of the sets of cliches that I think we need to lose very quickly is that business is bad. And also the idea about seniors being primarily interested in talking about pensions and frailty. You know, this is ageism, and we need to lose that very quickly. I think with a bit of imagination, we have a driving force in this province of people 50 and over who can contribute dynamically to the creativity of the province and also to the finances of this province. They just need to be asked and supported a little bit and not feel as if they're categorized into an area that doesn't seem welcoming. Secondly, as a business person, because I own and operate a business, I can tell you that many of us in business don't have two ethics, one for business and one for your personal life. We have one ethic, one sensibility, and one sense of feeling neighborly and wanting to have social justice for the communities in which we live. So being in business and being an interest in making money doesn't necessarily of itself preclude you from doing a humane thing. Often things are done because it's the right thing to do, and business people are no different in that regard. So those are two things I think is really important just to throw away so that the conversation is reframed about criteria rather than who. Because I can tell you that if you frame the conversation about provision of health services and home care in the right way, with enough complexity and sensitivity, that will impact the outcomes for the folks receiving it. One thing may be to consider not using the medical model, demedicalizing this whole process. So we're no longer talking about patients, we're talking about people, and we're talking about person-centered care. So those were just a couple of generalizations I wanted to throw out, but I think the costs and the level of service that are provided within this province could be significantly improved if we throw it all out in our thinking. I'm just talking about a thought exercise now, and rethink how these services can be delivered in creative, thoughtful ways in a non-medical model that provides levels of service that people expect and need at home.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Denise Peterson-Rayfield. I'm the MLA for Chester St. Margaret's. And I just want to, when you were talking, Angela, about your story, I have a story too, and it's like anything in life, you do not know what it's truly like until you walk into other people's shoes that have had that experience. My mom, in November, December, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. We knew something was going terribly wrong. She was not allowed to go back home. It was too big of a home and too old of a home. And so my dad and mom are now living in a smaller home. We're doing everything possible to keep them together, to keep her home. And it's been a very difficult journey. And I can tell you that without the home care service that we have received, we would never, never, never know where we would be. I can tell you honestly, each and every day that they receive home care, it is a blessing, and I thank God for it. And if it changes to privatization, I just don't know what's going to happen to our province, to those that are working in the profession. Our situation, my mom is on a list for long-term care for a home that was promised to be built in our constituency, but now is off the list. She's probably happy about that because she desperately doesn't want to go to a home. And it's sad because she's even threatened that she'd take her life if we put her in a home. And our only blessing is if she's so far along in the Alzheimer's when that happens, that she won't know. But I can tell you, and I know each and every one of you have stories here to say, so it's not just from me, but I'm walking the walk now with my parents, and probably each and every one of us will have some type of experience related to that. And if we don't save our home care profession and how blessed we are by nurses and by home care workers that give their all. All I could say is I'd like to invite everybody on the government side to spend even one day in the life of a home care worker, and they would never be privatized. I'll tell you that right now.
Who did I see? There we go.
So my name's Shauna Boudreau. I'm a nurse, an inpatient acute care registered nurse. And the comment that I want to add to the conversation is what worries me is if things get privatized, the quality of the care is not going to be there, the consistency of the care is not going to be there. And so guess what? People are going to end up in the emergency department with complications. And I mean, maybe they don't have a medical issue to start with. Maybe they're getting home supports, you know, housekeeping, groceries, meals, all of that. But if they're not getting the proper supports, that can turn into a fall that brings them into hospital. Or it can turn into many things. So it ends up being more of a burden on our acute care system that's already overburdened. So then you're going to have more emergency room visits. You're going to have more people in hospital. You're going to potentially have more people waiting for long-term care beds, sitting in a hospital that then can't go back home again. So that's just kind of my worry. Because it affects the home care, but it really affects the bigger system, for sure.
Anyone else?
Thank you. My name's Mary. I have witnessed this from a couple of different perspectives. Along with my brother and my son, we did tag team care for 3 years, looking after my father. And he did live at Northwood, but in independent apartments. So he was able to have the quality of life and the kind of end-of-life care that he wished. And we did involve outside agencies towards the end of his life. So we did get quite a good sense of what possibilities and the difficulties, the challenges are from a very personal perspective. The reason why I wanted to come, my father did pass away 10 years ago, and our mother is in long-term care now. So we do have, and my brother is a CCA, he's in the room now. So he is a very, very involved.
CCA.
Yes, very involved. But the reason why I wanted to add my voice, having to do with privatization, apart from the fact of having heard some of the fallout of the privatization experience in Alberta, not a good experience, not a good thing at all, and for patient care and for the workers who worked in that industry. But also, I was living in the UK, in London, for a year and a half, and staying with parents of a friend of mine. Her mother has supranuclear palsy, and so needed a huge amount of daily support. They did have, they had hired personal care workers, but they also had council staff come in. So home care provided by council. And so council, Westminster, did have privatized, contracted out care. I got to know the workers and often oriented them to her care needs. Even though I was working as a teacher, I got to know many of the care workers who came through, many of them immigrant women, new to the UK, and in a situation where they were working in low-paid occupations, afforded no travel time. They were off the clock for their travel time getting to patients. They were afforded no transit subsidy, and basically it was clockwork. And very often there was turnover in terms of they had to be like widgets, in terms of they had to fit in to where the needs were. Understandably, if you're profit-driven, sometimes that's what has to happen. But I got to witness the fact that they had to be oriented to her care on a regular basis. And so it was not good for her care, or for continuity of care, or for the workers who were involved with this. I got to see that very, very clearly, very strongly, and I do have a strong opinion about that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think it's a really important thing to keep in mind that the work of continuing care assistants of home support workers is really quite demanding. They're on the road, they're long hours, traveling, entering people's homes where you don't know what to expect. It can be quite dangerous. And often you have to provide your own vehicle. And this is for a wage that's often less than $18 an hour, so not even a living wage. But I'm sure there's people here in the room who can talk to that far better than I can. And I think in terms of the business, the profit model, I think for the Health Network, what we really wanted to highlight was the impacts of the competitive bidding. And by all accounts, it's been disastrous for care and for caregivers. And who else would like to speak?
I don't actually think this works.
Right
Work then over here so you can see me. Hi Charles, back there. Saw you come in earlier. It's nice to see your sister, actually. I'm represent RJF Healthcare, who's one of the providers of continuing care throughout the Capital District Health Authority. We've actually been doing this for 30 years. And contrary to, I noticed there's a lot of information in this room, and I'm really happy to see a turnout in this because there needs to be a more outspoken conversation about home care, the policies that government puts into place, and particularly, we're very passionate about the caregivers and having them valued appropriately. I completely agree a lot with Charles' sister, actually, of how they should be paid fully for their travel time, they should be paid a higher wage. They are undervalued, and they're going to become the most highly valued member of society over the next 15 years as we go through a global labor shortage, and it's going to be global. A 38% gap between the demand for labor and the supply. So taking care of our seniors and taking care of ourselves is important. However, I want to clarify a couple of things. I'm from a private company. We are quote unquote for-profit. We actually bill out and charge 30% less than Northwood and 150% less than VON. The service standards are set by the government, okay? They actually stipulate to all of us that we must supply the same level of care by the same standards to the same people. Our continuity must be the same, our contracts are the same. The only thing that varies is that in the private sector, they don't pay us as much. With this contract that's coming out, we are very concerned as well because we would like to see an increase in wages. We would like to see some of the benefits that VON employees get that we are unable to offer. We would like to see a harmony across the field for home care workers because it's very important that there is symmetry in this field and that they are respected. It is not the conversation about privatization that I'm concerned about. It is about the standards that are set and the policies that government sets. And if government sets policy whereby the wages are fair, they are equitable, especially in home care. This winter was brutal on home care workers. Going to and from homes not paid for their travel time, working a 12-hour day and getting paid for 8. Or having to go to a shift in the morning at 8 a.m. for 2 hours, leave for 4 because there's nobody booked in that time. There are numerous issues that the government has faced for years. It's not just the Liberals. This has been going on for 17 years. This is not a competitive bid. We actually had a contract in 1998 that we held, and so did Northwood, Sanders. There's a lot of us players in the room, actually. Bayshore's here, Sanders here, Leisure's here. And a lot of us home care people are here because we fully care about our clients. We adore our clients. We want to support our community. And I'm really glad that you're doing this. We want to work with you to bring more attention to this. But let's put the focus on the caregiver. You know, and for one thing, making sure that we're not Ontarioized. Because once that happens, things really do go downhill.
Not really a good speaker, but I gotta talk.
Great.
So I'm 27 years as a home care worker. And I started at $5 an hour. I'm now not making 18 yet, but close to it. We care about the people. We care about the job. And what's going on is upsetting to a lot of people. And But anyway, over the lifespan of doing this job, it's becoming more and more less time for the people. Cut, 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 cut. Rush, 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 rush. And I don't think that's fair to the client. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's my little spiel.
Back again.
Hi, my name's Andrea. I'm a continuing care assistant. I graduated in 2013. I came here I'm from here originally, but I was living in Saskatchewan, and I was a welder out there. Anyway, I had looked up some information about the whole continuing care plight of Nova Scotia, and the government said, we need you, we want you, move home, we're going to pay half of your tuition. You know, you will never be for want of a job. The benefits are great, the money is great. And so I took the course, and through my bursary and my course, my first job as a CCA was for a private company, which shall remain nameless. I went to school, I gave it my all, I heard all these wonderful promises, and I started at $12.80 an hour. My travel time was not paid for. I worked 13-hour days to make 7 hours pay. This company would not even mail out my pay stubs to me. If I wanted my pay stub, I had to get on a bus, and I had to go to the office and collect my pay stub because they didn't want to pay for the stamps. I'm no longer with that company. I'm now with Northwood. I am a full-time employee. I love what I do, and my days are full. And there's still people waiting, and there's still, you know, if somebody calls in sick in the middle of the day, there's a scramble to find, you know, other people to run to those jobs. And you know, with the stories that I've heard in this room, I live those things every day. I do the ceiling lifts, I do the personal care. And there are times where I'm sitting with weeping family members who are so exhausted and so distraught, and they need somebody to even give them 5 minutes, to just even listen to them. I mean, I cook for diabetic people. It's a highly specialized skill set that I have, and I'm really proud of it. And I love what I do, and I love the people that I do it for. And I can't imagine going back to $12.80 an hour and taking a bus so I can find out what my pay stub is. Like, this whole privatization and tendering thing scares me to death. I don't want to go back to welding, but if I have to, that's what I'm going to do. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for talking a little bit about what you do. I think that's one thing that's really missed in this conversation. And as others have mentioned, the importance of caregivers, home nurses, and CCAs in the province. And that's one thing that fundamentally struck me when I met with the Health Minister, Leo Glavine, because I asked him what one of the impetuses for doing this, what the rationale was. And he said he doesn't believe that home support workers should make $18 an hour to wash dishes. And as we've heard tonight, and as we know here in this room, that this is a fundamental misconception of the work of caregivers.
How much is he going to sell local bird to them for?
Hi, my name is Marie Claire Chartrand. I'm a longtime care coordinator with Continuing Care. But I'll speak to you as Joe Citizen tonight. Two things I want to mention. You know, the issue I have with privatization is that if there's any money being spent on home care, it should be going to two things. One is the workers primarily, and then training of the workers. I don't feel any money in terms of healthcare should be going for profit. What we haven't talked about tonight is the non-for-profits and what else they offer besides the service. I know VON have offered, they have a whole slew of other programs that they offer to their clientele, including meal delivery programs, VON transportation programs for seniors who can't get out. They have breakaway programs, they're called. They have probably about 8 different programs that are offered. So when they're bringing or charging, whatever they are, for their services, that money is going back into the community rather than lining somebody's pockets.
Hi, my name is Becky Myers, and I used to work for VON. And then I left VON to work as a family practice nurse. So my salary was paid by doctors, and I had minimal benefits, no education opportunities, and I had to negotiate my own wage. So now I am working for continuing care in Central Zone, where I am getting lots of educational opportunities and making the same wages as my peers.
Anyone else? Anyone on the panel like to add a comment? Okay, see you over here.
I'm not as experienced in this field as some of you, so I have to ask a question.
Yeah, great.
From what I understand happening here, more and more money is going to be going to maybe privatize home care. Does that mean there's less and less construction of nursing homes? Is that kind of the counterbalance there? Of course, most of you will have to stay home longer and get home care. And I suppose that some of this home care, some of it is paid totally and some of it is subsidized? Yeah, okay. But that's what I'm trying to find out, is there, this is connected with the construction of fewer homes, urban nursing homes? That's, okay.
I can speak to that. Yeah. So the current Liberal government has come in and promised that there will be no new long-term care beds, and instead they're going to be focusing on home care. Mr. Bailey, maybe before I get you run out, I can make a couple comments.
Look, I honestly just wanted to came here to listen to what you all had to say. I wasn't planning to make comments, and there's a vote in the legislature at 8:12, so we have to walk back, so that's why we're going. I'm so glad I got to hear what you all had to say. I will tell you, it's very personal for me too. You asked who has a family member home care. I put up my hand. My dad is very sick. He's at home. My mother looks after him as best she can, and so do my sister and I. But he gets the full allotment of government-funded home care because of their income and because of his high level of need. And for all of you that are home care workers in the room, I know you know this, but I can't tell it to you enough. What our home care worker Brenda does for my dad, I can never thank enough. But beyond that, the life it provides for my mother, who otherwise is really going above and beyond trying to keep them home, is something that doesn't get recognized. So I just want to add that from a very personal level. My concern, absolutely, is the level of care that's provided, that we have to make sure we protect the high level of care that people get in home care now, and that the workers that provide it are paid fairly for the benefits that they receive. I don't know what the government's long-term vision is for home care, but we can't let those things go. We may discuss the details of how it's provided, and I'm really glad to hear all your opinions on that, but there are certain principles that we can't lose. And by the way, just on your question, I'm sorry, give a politician a microphone. I really think it's an awful choice that the government puts in front of people. You can have home care, or you can have advanced level care in nursing home, and if we have more of one, we have to have less of the other. That is a visionless future for our province. Fact is, there are people who need the advanced level of care that's provided in a long-term care facility. We should never cut them short because we want to put more money in home care. We need to make sure everybody's looked after.
Could you tell Mr. Harper that?
Healthcare is 100% a provincial responsibility, and you do need to double check your math because the money coming from Ottawa goes up every single year. It's not a cut. But I will absolutely pass that on to any level of government. Sorry, it's true. I will pass that on to every level of government that can help us fund both the nursing home care and the home care that we need. And I hope we keep partisan politics on this because for my dad and my mom, it's too important. So thank you.
building out. One thing that's been lacking is public consultation, so we'll hope we'll have more of this. It's taken my small, struggling NGO to do that. So I hope you can raise that in the House this Wednesday on the official opposition day and get some answers for us.
All right.
Could you explain the funding cuts again?
Yeah, so the federal government, I have my math done really well. So the federal government funds healthcare as a shared responsibility with provinces, and that's always been the case. When Tommy Douglas and the government at the time, federal, provincial, brought it in with Medicare, it originally was 50-50. So the federal government funded half, provinces funded the other half. Slowly that's eroded over time, and that's gone down and down. And now, last time we were looking at about 20%, but since Harper has changed the way that the healthcare funding gets established, it's going to go down to about 12% federal, the rest provincial. And normally what happens is the Prime Minister, the Health Minister of the federal government sits down with the premiers and the health ministers and they negotiate an agreement, the 10-year health accord. What happened in 2009 in Victoria is that Harper and the finance minister at the time walked into the premier's meeting, uninvited, unannounced, and put a note on the podium that said that there would be no new health accord. And so while there might not be an exact cut, healthcare has been going up and increased for 6% year after year after year, and that's become expected. So if you're raising healthcare at 6% every year, and you suddenly start raising it by 1% funding, because you always have to raise healthcare if people are sick, it's a matter of life and death. That's a huge reduction. Whether you want to call that a cut or not, it's a difference of $36 billion across the country over the next decade. Call it a cut, call it a reduction, the money's not there. To your comment, yes, the cost for home support ranges for about $30 per hour to $58 per hour, depending on your income. That's a monthly amount. And for nursing, it's up to $90 per hour, depending on your income, and they're capped at a monthly amount. And there's also support for unpaid caregivers. Low-income households can receive up to $400 per month. But to qualify, you need to be receiving, your income needs to be below $22,000 per year. So really nothing. This support is for people already living well below the poverty line. There's also an additional $500 a month if you have a very high level of impairment, cognitive disability. But we've heard from patients, from family members, this is very hard to get and actually qualify. That's some of the supports that are available for home care. But they've said there will be no new long-term care beds.
Just one more comment. I shouldn't speak twice, but my concern is, and I'm sure all of you who have much more experience than I do, is that there's a different need when people reach, let's say, 85 and 90 and have Alzheimer's and dementia. And at that stage, when people are like diapers and this kind of stuff, a lot of people really need to go to homes. Like, it's just impossible to look after them, not because the family doesn't want to, but it becomes very, very difficult. And I think for the people that need that kind of care, like, there has to continue to be homes. Because, you know, there's a certain, when people have, like, have very big problems with mobility and mental ability, you know, and it may only happen when they're quite a bit older. Like, that's a different step. And there should be homes, because otherwise it's just impossible to live at home, even with the best intention in the world.
Nursing homes.
Nursing homes, nursing homes.
Yeah.
There's a certain level that, I mean, they have to make a distinction as to who should be encouraged to stay home and who the home should be kept for. Like, because when people become, bedridden and in diapers, not easy to look after them at home, no matter how well intended you are.
Thank you. My name is Becky Kent. I'm here on behalf of Ocean View. Ocean View has a 50-year history of offering continuing care in the Eastern Passage and Dartmouth areas. But I'm also here on behalf of their new enterprise, Ocean View Serving Seniors. And I want to speak to two things in association to why I'm here. First, I'd like to speak to Mr. Bailey's comment and the balance that really is needed in Nova Scotia for choices for our seniors as they journey through life, or people who need supports. and at any stage in life to continue to have choices and options for where they live. Ocean View Serving Seniors has been developed in recognition of Ocean View's continuing care work, that there are many seniors in the continuing care spectrum of need that is associated to that layer of options, supporting them in their homes in whatever way. One of the speakers earlier mentioned the not-for-profits, the community government organizations. That's exactly what Ocean View is, and I know that there are elements of that with Northwood. There are, what I fear with what's happening, about to happen, and I acknowledge that there are wonderful businesses in Nova Scotia that do offer quality care, and I have no doubt that the lady that spoke earlier, you spoke with passion, you know, and you can read that in people. So it doesn't mean that there's not a need, I don't think, for that type of service, but I fear that with the privatization of home care, it really is continuing to diminish the value that our not-for-profit, that community government organizations are bringing to the table. It's challenging enough, but I can tell you, in the work that we do, and I was a former municipal government official and MLA, and the people that I've come across, there are organizations out there that are doing amazing work, and the businesses, the private gain industry, do not have the captured solutions and expertise exclusively. There are a lot of community government organizations out there that can do this. I believe there needs to be a balance, and I think that when we look at the value of service, the need and support for people who are in need of home care, it cannot be only about the money at the end of the day and the cost to a government, and it can't be about the private profit that an agency might get, and it cannot be about the ability or non-ability for a non-profit agency to step up to the plate. There needs to be a combination of all of them, and I don't think they've hit the mark on this. So I appreciate that you're having this conversation. I hope that you'll continue to do that on behalf of our families and all of the agencies and the stakeholders, the players that are going to be part of the solutions. We cannot do it the way we used to. Change has to happen. There's amazing things, I believe, coming forward. The Alzheimer's societies, the not-for-profits, the private businesses, they all have a piece of the puzzle. I think it's about connecting them together, but connecting them together in recognition that they all have something value to offer the people who need our supports. Thank you.
I don't think this works either. I guess one of the things that it works for you.
For the recording of the citizens.
One of the things that concerns me is that I see the home is now the nursing home. I mean, back not so many years ago, people stayed in their homes, and eventually they did go to a nursing home. And I see that people, you know, many of the people that I care for really don't have that option. And so the home is, you know, it was kind of a given that the home is not a controlled environment. But if we're going to continue to deliver the kind of care that we're doing, the home has to be more of a controlled environment, because we have long-term care, you know, people in homes that need teams. And then we have people, it strikes me too, like, who pays for the grab bars? If people don't have grab bars on their job, who pays for it? You know, in this situation, we come across the CCA workers all the time. We come into homes, they don't have any grab bars. There's all kinds of things, you know, missing. Like our employer can't pay for that. It's the government that has to, you know, put these. So I really see that we have to do a lot of work in terms of making the home, you know, sort of more accessible, you know, to healthcare, you know, work. And there's an incredible amount of emotional labor that goes into this job that's often not recognized as well. Like, as soon as you walk in the door, you begin a relationship. And that's all.
One thing that I've noticed in the time that I've spent doing this job and with this current level of government is there's been a shift in focus from long-term care and facilities, from hospitals to to home care, and they've been very explicit about this. It's about the means to reduce costs in the healthcare system. But even in that time, it's since shifted from home care workers, home nurses, to informal caregivers. So in the last budget, there's been more and more money for supports, for credits, for family members to provide care. And this is a welcome addition, but it's also a bit troubling if we start funding and focusing exclusively on family members, most of whom are women, as a means to provide care, but we're not funding healthcare workers themselves to do it, or the facilities. Who else would like to speak?
Hi, my name is Trish, and I'm an acute care nurse. And I've done floor nursing, I've done charge nursing, and I don't think people understand the level of organization it takes just to discharge a patient from home and get them set up with home care. And, you know, I commend all the CCAs that are out there. We have CCAs I work with every day, and we work as a team. And speaking from someone I've looked after my mother for 6 months in my own home, and I took her home and cared for her till she died, and I had VON come into my home. But I was the support care worker that was left behind with a 16-year-old son that would assist me because that was my choice. And I think that to think that these CCs are out there by themselves and the amount of care they have, they don't have a team player with them to assist them with their care, with their lifts, with their transfers, and everything else they do for their patients. And I think people don't understand that those that live in a rural community, it's very difficult to get, you know, home support in place to get people home. And it's nothing to call, you know, home care, and it could be a 1-day delay, a 2-day delay, a 3-day delay, a 4-day delay, depending on where the patient is going, what level of support is needed, and all this kind of organization that takes place. So the government wants you to stay in your home, which is great because it all comes down to choice. And we send people home that require far more amount of care that I can't even imagine that we send home with, but it is family choice. And they deserve the respect that if they choose to take their husband, their mother, their child home, whatever it is, that we have to support them and have that level of service in place. Not only that, but it's respite care. So for your father's partner, his partner so that he can keep him home, she has the proper supports to help him with his personal care. But if she needs a break to go out and get the groceries, that there's respite care. And I don't think people realize that there's respite care that has to be available. And when you come into a home, come into the hospital, then we have a social worker that helps organize to get the grab bars in place for the bathroom. And there's funding for that. And there's all kinds of different organizations that we work with. Because where I work, I deal with a very, you know, elderly population with tons of comorbidities that probably people should not even be going home, but they want to go home, and we totally respect their families' decision, the patients' decisions. So we do everything we possibly can for funding and home visits to get all this in place. So I totally respect that, you know, how important it is to keep your dad home, and that the consistency of care, that it's the same workers that come to your home because you feel safe. Then you go to work knowing that, you know, everything is in place for your dad. And I mean, I was touched by that. I was almost crying in the background myself because I can really appreciate it.
My name is Dan. Just want to echo the last comment. I'm in ER.
Maybe a little louder.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can't hear me because, yeah. I keep forgetting what the microphone. But I'm an ER physician in the city, and I just want to say, kind of echoing the past two comments from Mr. Woodward's last comment, how important it is to have continuity and having a care worker who knows the patient. I can make contact with that person. The amount of times I've had a plan in an acute care setting that I've said, well, that changes everything, basically having the eyes and ears of the care workers. In addition, I've been seeing a huge rising tide of people who are coming in who are informal caregivers who are in acute crisis. And the patient presents the person who's kind of in care, and as the discussion goes on, I get a second patient who is the informal caregiver who just takes a crisis point, and then they become a patient themselves. So that's one there for the points.
Hi there.
It's just your use. You need to use your outdoor voice.
Oh, very odd. Hi there. I'm Linda Orzan, and I'm the MLA in Truro and new critic for community services. So this falls under the portfolio of health. But I'm hearing from a lot of home care workers who are extremely worried about the future. And I have to say, again, with aging parents myself, I'm worried for the future in a province where it seems like the government is hell-bent on privatizing everything. And I don't necessarily want to make it political, but everything that I've been seeing so far in Province House is privatization and killing off the unions, trying to get rid of the unions, stamp them down, shut them up, shut up us, even as the MLAs speaking in law amendments. And this is a very disturbing, I think, trend. And I think it's something that we as citizens who care about democracy need to be very well aware of, because this is the way of the future right now. And this particular workforce, which is, as I'm told, the oldest workforce, mainly women, were the first guinea pigs who came and protested that they wanted a raise, a small raise, and were denied that raise, and then were told that not only that, but they weren't allowed to strike, that they're considered essential care workers, and yet they didn't want to give them any more money. Well, there's something wrong with that picture. And now 2 years later, we roll down, or a year and a half, and now they're trying to privatize the industry. I think something's rotten in the state of Denmark, and we need to do something about it. So on that note, I also have to get back to the legislature to vote, but I want to say we're there to fight for you, and please continue to write your letters to us, and we'll help in every way we can. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank all of, I'm seeing a bunch of hands now. I'd like to thank all the MLAs who came out tonight, and it's really encouraging to see. We've invited the Liberals at every step of the way, and they have not come out. This is the 5th town hall meeting, so I'm really hoping that changes. So Terry Farrell came out in Amherst. He's the first one. But I encourage you all to write to your local MLAs to send them your thoughts about this and what you think.
John, could you let Sandra speak?
James, yeah.
James,
Hi, I'm Sandra. I would consider myself a continuing care specialist. I've worked in long-term care, and I have recently just retired from working in a home care organization. And I thank Becky Kent for your comments, because I think you've synthesized things very nicely. That there is room for all, and I think there is a danger when we say that, it has to be one thing or another thing. So to preserve choices for people, I think is, really needs to be underlined, cannot be undermined. As well, what really concerns me is if what you said about the Minister of Health's comments and appreciation of home support is, we're not paying $18 for washing dishes. That's very disturbing. And I think that's really what touches me more than anything, is that the people in these decision-making places, and guess what? I think we voted them there. So I always say, well, what can we say? However, that is very concerning, because we want to ensure that decisions are being based on real information and on evidence, right? I mean, that's when we ask questions or look for increases or even look for changes. It has to be based on evidence. So where is the evidence in that comment? I'd like to know. And so thank you to the coalition you're called, Public Health?
Coalition.
Yeah, for providing, us, the public of whom I'm one, opportunities like this. There has to be education. Who spoke to that? Was that you, Laurel? That said yes, because, people really have no idea. And it's not either or, long-term care or home care. It is not. And I think that we need to make sure that message is there too. So for the people in need, in absolute, there will be the places, the facilities for them to go. And I think that's an important point too, assessment. Let's make sure that we're doing that, those assessors are making sure that people are, you know, being assessed for what it is they actually need, and then the resources are followed. So thank you very much.
My name is Kathy Morgan, and I'm a gerontologist, and over the past year, I've been working at helping put on the 50 Plus Expo for this year. And we're adding a new piece to the Expo, and that's a conference, which is an age-friendly conference, and there's 3 segments to this. The first is age-friendly hospitals. Where are we in having age-friendly hospitals here in Nova Scotia? We'll look at the promising practices and the barriers, and we have several physicians coming to speak at that. We have another segment on continuing care, and I'm just absolutely pleased to hear your comments that you made and the data that you brought forth. One of those being, we want to bring a public voice. At the Expo, there's an opportunity to spread these sign-ups, and we can help bring a public voice to that. There'll be they're generally over 5,000 people that come there. With the doctors that I've had conversations with, I've heard over and over again, we need to teach people how to advocate. And so that's in line with your bit about education, absolutely. And I think Becky, you did a remarkable overview of this. We do need to have a balance.
I need like Jeopardy music for
Hi, my name is Larry Haven, and I teach management at St. Mary's University. We have to look at this in perspective. Over the last 35 years, Nova Scotia has become 50% richer in GDP per capita. How many of you feel 50% richer? Well, those who can remember back 35 years ago. The reason is that while the province's economy has grown by 50%, the average weekly, real weekly income has dropped by 3%. So most Nova Scotians are poorer. So the question you might well ask is, where did all the money go? Because there has been extra wealth created. And economist Mathieu Dufour and I, a number of years ago, did a study in which we showed that the increase in wealth has gone almost completely to those who are owners of capital or investors, and that's gone up, while that going to people who work for a living has gone down. So we should feel 50% richer if it was distributed fairly, and we should be able to afford 50% better services and government services and programs. So we should be asking that before. If you go to government, they say, well, we can't afford it. We can.
Other comments as we start wrapping up? Last call.
Hi there, I'm Maureen McDonald, the MLA for Halifax, Needham, North End Halifax, and former health minister. This is an area I know a bit about, not only in terms of policy, but having aging parents who have gone through the healthcare system in the last few years and having the excellent support of home support workers coming in to care for my dad, as it turns out. I think it's really important to recognize the degree that this change, this direction that the government are heading in, will result in like enormous upheaval in the system for what, in fact, they're predicting to be a very small amount of savings. They're looking at savings through the call they're putting out this fall as being $500,000. We spend over close to $4.5 billion on health care. So it blows my mind when I think about the implications of throwing the system into upheaval to get $500,000. Not that $500,000 isn't a lot of money to most of us, but it's kind of a ridiculous proposition in many respects. The idea that the system isn't working and that this reorganization is going to result in some massive transformation is really disturbing to me. There are many, many things that we need to focus on to improve home care. And I see people in the room who know this. You know, there are all kinds of things we need to be doing to make it a better system, a more flexible system, a more responsive system, a patient-centered system. This is not it. What they're doing is not it. And it's being driven very much by a very managerial, mindset and an idea that nurses are paid too much in Nova Scotia and home support workers are paid too much in Nova Scotia. And that's going to be our challenge, I think, is to really be able to articulate how little will be saved, how little the system and the things that need to be changed will actually be changed, and the focus that we could bring to it, bring to this really important issue to improve the system is an entirely different focus. And one of the things that the NDP caucus are really committed to do is to look at all kinds of things that we could do to make the system more effective and better for patients and not get bogged down in trying to save money off the backs of the people who deliver the service.
Great. And I think we'll go now to the panel for closing remarks and comments and start wrapping up. Thank you.
Sure. Listening to everybody, the comments that are being made, it really, to me, boils down to the fact that the people are being forgotten in all of this. And I know that we all have to economize and we watch our pennies and we do all of those things, but when I see, the Giles and wondering, what is going to happen, and we all like to be able to have a plan and to know what's happening, so to be able to have a voice in some of the decisions and to be able to help lower that stress, to be able to know that you had some choice, some input, some decision making to that, so that they don't forget that we are all people, we are all humans, we all have feelings, and nobody sits down and says, oh, I want a nurse or a home support worker on such and such a day because of this. A lot of people are thrown into issues with health care, and so there are so many adjustments. And I truly hope that they will not forget that it's actual real people that are living this that need to be considered in decisions that are made.
I just want to say that I think that we make the choice in terms of what kind of community we want to live in. Do we want to live in a community where people are cared for and that the people delivering the care to people in our community are cared for? So we make that commitment and that decision, not the government.
Maybe I'll just say that it's been really great to hear everyone else's experiences as well. I'm glad that others also shared. I don't represent a constituency in this role, and I think every one of us has an individual experience with this. And ultimately, for me, it does need to come down to choice. The patient or family member or whomever is in that position that they're able to make a decision, it needs to be choice. And as well, when government is considering making decisions like this, I mean, it's interesting because often governments will, when they first come into power, they'll do these financial consultations where they'll say, you know, just in relation to Larry's comment back there, they'll say, we don't have lots of money, so we need to figure out where to get money from. So what cuts do you think we should be making? What services need to have a reduction in funding in order for us to be able to provide funding elsewhere, instead of recognizing the importance of the funding that exists in the social service programs like the home care system. And so for this instance, I think it would be really important to have consultations, as been discussed already. Patients need to be consulted, workers need to be consulted, and the general public as well needs to be consulted before any dramatic changes like this take place. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think it's a really important element to end on. The fact that we need to be speaking to government. We've invited the Liberals at every stop. This is the 5th town hall meeting we've had. Only one have joined us so far. So I really encourage you to use your voice and to contact them. You can reach the health minister at health.minister@novascotia.ca.